Don't you know that you so wrong, man? You're wrong and here's why. Chris and Greg don't see eye to eye, like none of the time. Robert Covington stinks, I don't care what you think. How is LeBron James the king when he's ruining teams? You're wrong and here's why. Underdog Sports presents. You're wrong and here's why. Underdog Sports presents. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of You're Wrong and Here's Why. I'm Chris Warwoodell, joined as always by Greg Crone, the sniffling bandit right there. Gregory, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. A little case of the allergies today, Chris, but overall, pretty good.
Well, I'm happy to hear it's allergies and not, fall coming early, a little cold come early down there in beautiful Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So Gregory, what's the weather like in Pennsylvania today?
Today it was a little hot and muggy, not gonna lie, but it's been getting a little bit cooler. Still sitting around 75 to 80s every day at the peak hours, but we're slowly and gradually getting a little bit cooler at night.
That is how fall works. That is, yes, one of the basic tenets of fall. It gets cooler. We are going to have 97 here on Friday. That is too warm for September.
It's too warm forever. Agreed.
All right. Well, on this week's episode, that's the one and only time that Greg and I will agree on this show. This week's show, we're going to talk about why the Miami Dolphins will not finish 16-0. We're going to talk about why Marlon Mack is going to finish in the top 5 in the NFL in rushing, and why the NL East, I wrote NFL East, that's not correct, why the NL East will have both wildcard teams in the NL playoffs. Gregory, kick us off and tell me why the Dolphins are going to manage to win one.
So, listen, I know in the past we've seen a few teams, I guess, in the recent NFL seasons do the unthinkable and go winless. But let's be honest, it's just something that doesn't happen really that often. I mean, the fact that it's happened twice, I guess, in the last decade or so is sort of a lightning doesn't ever strike twice kind of situation when you think about how old the NFL is. And we'll start with, I guess, this week's game, the Lamar Jackson coming out party. That led to, as reported, multiple players in the locker room after the game reaching out to their agent and looking to get out of Miami as fast as possible. But teams just don't go 0-16. As bad as teams are, this is the NFL. They still have professional players, and they're going to be able to pull at least one win out. And the games that you can look at are the games inside of their own division. The games inside of their own division, not against the Patriots, despite the fact that they are wildly successful against the Patriots at home in recent years. The games against the Bills and against the Jets are the four you can circle where you're going to get a win out of one of those two.
I looked at because I was curious about this when you put this topic forward, and I looked over at Bovada Sportsbook for what the line was, and Bovada has the Dolphins plus 19.5 this week.
9.5? Is that for 19.5? Oh, my word. I think, that is astronomically high. That's college football, like
highest
mid-range.
I've ever seen for a college game, or NFL game.
Yeah, it's mid-range, like mid-tier, Big Five conference team playing a lower tier group of 5 team.
This is Penn State versus Towson.
Yeah, exactly. It's legitimately absurd. That shouldn't be an NFL line. And if I'm going to be honest with you, taking the Dolphins plus 19.5 seems like the play here. Teams just don't cover that type of line in the NFL on a usual basis. Now, the Patriots, obviously, especially with their new offensive weaponry, that we may see that, but I think the Dolphins is the play there.
What do you think of the Antonio Brown thing before we get into the Dolphins a little bit further? Obviously there's some allegations levied upon him this week. Do you think we're going to see AB in the lineup this weekend? Do you think we will see AB in the lineup anytime soon?
I think he plays on Sunday,
Wow.
to be perfectly honest. I know with all the stuff that went down yesterday, the civil case being filed against him, I mean, it really depends on what they see and what comes out over the next 48 to 72 hours, but I just don't think it's going to move fast enough from a court standpoint and from, an investigation standpoint that's going to bar any sort of suspension just yet. We've seen guys on other teams throughout the NFL have allegations of different off-the-field issues, and we still see them right back on there prior to investigations happening.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, and this is not to diminish, a potential victim, because, if these things happened, it's horrendous and she should have justice. What I will say, however, with that caveat, is that this feels like really convenient timing.
Yeah, and you hate to even because the allegations are so serious, you hate to even think something like that, because like you said, if these incidents occurred, it's awful. Kick this dude out of the league. We're done with you. You can't. It's so much bigger than football, and when you get to that point. But if it's a ploy the other way, and you're just trying to sort of kind of cash in.
Absolutely cash in.
Based off what's been going on with him and the news and everything, it's really, really weird. It's weird that people stoop to that type of thing.
Well, it's heinous in a whole different way than the actual act would be heinous. But
right.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I don't know. I don't think this Antonio Brown thing is going to last very long in New England, but let's talk about the Dolphins in this completely winless thing lasting throughout the entire season. I'm looking at the schedule right now. Week 2, the Patriots, that's a loss. Week 3, the Cowboys, that's a loss. Week 4, the Chargers, that's a loss. Week 5, they can lick their wounds in a bye week. Don't have to take a loss, but obviously don't get a win either. Week 6, the Redskins are better than people thought they were. I think we saw that this weekend, and they're only going to get better as they sort of gel together more. That's a loss. I'm going to mark this Bills game on October 20th as a question mark. The Pittsburgh game, they're not as bad as they showed on Sunday. That's a loss. The Jets game, I happen to be big on the Jets this year. That's a loss. The Colts game, that's a loss. The Bills game, again, we'll leave this as a question mark. The Browns game, the Browns are not what they showed on Sunday. That is going to be a loss. And if the Browns are as bad, I don't think Freddie Kitchens is going to be the head coach at that point. So that's only going to help that team. Eagles on the 1st of December, that is a loss. The Jets, December 8th, that's a loss. Giants, the 15th, we'll put a question mark there. Bengals is a loss. Patriots is a loss. So what this comes down to is Miami has to beat a New York team to win a game this year, be it more likely the Bills or Giants, less likely the Jets. I don't see this happening. I really don't. I think this team is going to hardcore implode. And the worst thing that could happen to them after that just unimaginably bad defeat, where they looked horrible in a 59-10 loss, completely hapless against the Ravens, is to play the Patriots. The Patriots are going to win this game by 35. The morale on this team is going to be as low as it can ever possibly be. And then they get a good Dallas team after that. And then they get a good Chargers team after that. This Dolphins team is going to be ruined psychologically by the time they get to their early season bye week 5. And there's not going to be coming back from that.
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see an early season slide. I think what we're really going to have to wonder is are there enough guys on this team who want to put out good tape? Because despite being on a terrible team in the NFL, everybody's playing for that next contract or that next opportunity or that next job. It's not a hey, I'm content here, and especially a team like the Dolphins who's traded away most of those hey, I'm content here, I got paid guys. And it's the games with the Bills, they're a huge question mark. The Bills got lucky over the weekend. The Jets missed an extra point. The Jets really kind of choked on offense, but the Bills turned the ball over 4 times on offense and still somehow got a win. It's almost unheard of to be -4 in the turnover game and still win, especially on the road. You circled that Bengals game at the end of the season as a loss.
I did not. Oh, it was a loss. Yes.
As a loss, I don't know where the Bengals are going to be. They put Seattle. they tested Seattle this weekend without A.J. Green. They actually utilized John Ross on offense. But I don't know how long Andy Dalton is for this team, and I also don't know contention-wise where they're going to be at that point. Same with the Patriots in Week 17. I know we said it's a loss, but if the Patriots are, say, 16-0, or we're 15-1, let's put it that way, where undefeated isn't necessarily a question. If they're 15-1 headed into that Week 17 game,
then
I would think that
their season would be over.
Gregory,
Gregory, their season would be over. They would be 14-1 in that situation.
14-1. My apologies. It's math today. It's math every week.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I see what you're saying. I don't. Do I think the Patriots' backups are better than the Dolphins' starters? Yeah, probably.
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, I just don't. It's always with the Patriots. It always feels like the rich get richer. And I know my conversation from last week with the Steelers beating them was wildly incorrect. But it seems very likely that we were going to see the Patriots on that second to last NFL Sunday hosting the AFC Championship at Foxborough.
I don't know, Greg. I think the second to last week of the season, they're going to be playing in the Pro Bowl because the Chiefs and the Ravens are going to be playing in the AFC Championship game.
You just said the absolute word. This Ravens team. I mean, listen. What happened on Sunday was awesome for the Ravens, for their fans, for all the backers of the Ravens. But again, we know how bad this Dolphins team is. I know the Ravens looked great, but to buy into this hype that the Ravens are going to be some sort of world beater when they beat legitimately a team that is, in a nice, no other term, tanking. The Dolphins are tanking for a top pick. They traded away their franchise left tackle 4 days before the season started. They traded away a starting linebacker. They got rid of a wide receiver, guys who contributed on offense and defense. They got rid of these guys right before the season started. So to come out and say, oh, wow, the Ravens, look how impressive they were. Look how great Lamar Jackson is. He was fantastic. But if you think that Marquise Brown is going to be running 10 yards behind defenders every Sunday, I just don't see it yet. It's one of these things where, people love to overreact, especially in fantasy football, where they trade away their first round pick because they could get Lamar Jackson. It's weird to me to jump all over this week one.
I don't know. I don't know if it was Bovada or elsewhere, but I saw the over-under for touchdown passes on the season for Lamar Jackson prior to the year was set at 15.5.
That's a disgrace. So, I heard that prior to the season starting, and to think that an NFL quarterback's going to throw less than that many touchdowns, literally throw less than one per game. Yeah. It's ridiculous, and obviously he's off to an unbelievable start for over-bettors in that situation, but it's a disgrace for them to even set that line that low.
Hey, look, I'm not jumping on any bandwagon. We can go back, replay the audio from last week prior to any games being played, and this guy said it was going to be either the Ravens or the Browns in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. So I'm not jumping on any bandwagon, fella, and don't you put that evil on me.
I'm more furious at a gentleman in one of my fantasy leagues who took Travis Kelce in the first round and then traded him to the team that had one weakness after week one for Lamar Jackson because he would have him as a 13th round keeper next year. Nothing like giving up on your fantasy season after week one for zero reason and trading your first round pick because you have a guy who could be a 13th round keeper.
I don't love Lamar Jackson in keeper leagues either. I think there's far too high risk of an injury, even though, both he and Kyler Murray threw the ball strangely little ran the ball strangely little this past weekend. I think part of that was by design to sort of get teams to worry about the throwing aspect of their games and then unleash the running later on. But but weird. I wouldn't
Jackson
be on that.
Could throw to anybody last week. Everybody was wide open, and you don't have to run when you can throw a 55-yard touchdown pass on play 2 of your drive.
I know, but why were they so wide open? Xavier Howard is allegedly a very good football player. This is not a terrible secondary. Rasheed Jones is there. Minka Fitzpatrick's there. they should be able to cover people at least a little bit. And that did not happen. This team looked horrendous. They looked like they quit very early. It'll be interesting to see if a Xavier Howard or Devontae Parker or somebody like that gets moved. Because you hit the nail on the head. They are 110% tanking. And that is why they're going to manage to tank their hearts out to an 0-16 season.
It feels almost impossible to tank in the NFL, but the Dolphins are really trying to prove that. I just don't think that there's a chance that they can lose every game. The NFL's too weird now. It's such a week by week league, and we do these overreactions to one game and anoint teams as the best teams in the NFL. It's just like me, who gladly gloated about the Browns' performance last week. I know the Browns aren't that bad, and I know the Titans aren't that good. It's just one of those things where, because we have such a small sample size, people are going to overreact and go right into it.
So you're saying Andy Dalton's not going to lead the league in passing yards at the end of the season?
That is a fact, Chris.
All right, well, I'm not one to overreact, so we're going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to tell you why the current NFL rushing leader, Marlon Mack, is going to finish in the top 5 in the NFL in rushing this year. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. It is the best time of year. It's football season, and Yahoo has officially released their Week 1 daily fantasy football contests. They actually have a $1 million contest for Week 1 with no management fee and $100K to first place, meaning more money goes back to you, the players. There is a 10 entry max. You're not going to be playing against people with 100, 150 lineups on the sites. They've capped it. They've made it more manageable. They've increased your chances to win. Yahoo also has a $100K guaranteed contest, so there's lots of prizes out there for Week 1. Tons for you to win. And this isn't just for the fantasy football hardcore fanatics. This is for everybody. If you're just getting started with Yahoo Fantasy Football, join the free-to-enter Yahoo Cup and play all season long. They've got $150,000 in weekly and season-long prizes. And if you get a perfect lineup, you win $1 million. 1 million, 2 commas with a 1 before it. It's a lot of money. Sign up today at yahoo.com/dailyfantasy or by downloading the Yahoo Fantasy app. You get $20 in free play when you make the first deposit using the promo code POD25. No waiting on that bonus. You can use it right away to enter contests. The minimum deposit is only $5. That's the promo code POD25, POD25. Head over to Yahoo today. All right, Gregory, we're back, and we're going to talk a little Marlon Mack. Dr. Seuss. I don't know. It's been a weird day. Look, we're going to talk about Marlon Mack here and why I believe he's going to finish in the top 5 in the NFL. Total rushing yards. I joked before the break about overreacting after a single game, and obviously Marlon Mack had a huge first game for the Colts this year. 174 yards rushing on 25 attempts, 7 yards a carry, gets in the end zone. Looks great. Looks absolutely spectacular. But the reason I think this is going to hold up is, one, I've always been a Marlon Mack fan. 2, this team's looking for an identity now that Andrew Luck is gone. And that identity is going to be pound the ball to Marlon Mack behind those big offensive linemen like Quentin Nelson. This is going to hold up, if for no other reason, then he is going to be force-fed the ball. A la the 77 catch season Terrell Pryor, and I will call him Terrell because it doesn't deserve to be called Terrell. Doesn't deserve the proper pronunciation of his name because he's garbage. He's a garbage man. I lost a weird little tirade there, and I lost my track. I'm losing my mind. It's the important thing to realize, and later on, people, doctors probably, police officers will listen to these tapes, and they'll say, Chris was clearly going crazy at this point. We should have all seen it coming. We should have all seen it coming. No, but he's going to be force-fed the ball like Terrell Pryor was in the 77 catch season for the Browns because he's the only option. They have to go somewhere with the football. He is the best chance of success on any given play, and that's why it's going to hold up. This is a good football player who has a great opportunity.
Yeah, we also talk about the overreaction part of it, and I do think one of the interesting things that the Colts are going to bring is they don't really have that pressure on them now, which is an interesting thing to think about in the NFL, where 3 weeks ago, we were talking about Andrew Luck potentially leading them into the Super Bowl, and now after the sudden retirement, the gloves are kind of off, and Mack is certainly going to have, an opportunity to sort of take over as the de facto offensive powerhouse for the Colts. However, there are plenty of other offensive powerhouses that I see taking that crown and keeping Marlon Mack out of the top 5. And just to rattle off a few guys, Christian McCaffrey, who had another big game. Obviously, he does a lot of damage receiving, but he always has that potential to break off any run. Same with Saquon Barkley, who, for all intents and purposes, is really the only weapon on offense for the Giants. And if the Daniel Jones era comes sooner rather than later for them, we may see a heavy dose of Saquon out of the backfield. Dalvin Cook had an unbelievable game against the Atlanta Falcons, who looked just overmatched by Minnesota. And if you take anything away from that game, Kirk Cousins only threw 10 times. I think that's very telling for how run-heavy this team is going to be going forward. So that's 3. And then if you get into the Alvin Kamara situation, now he's weird because we may see him more just catching the ball out of the backfield, which great for fantasy owners who live in the points per reception world, and then just giving the ball a lot more to Latavius Murray. But what we saw from Josh Jacobs Monday night out of the Raiders was a lot of up-the-middle smash-mouth running, and he looked phenomenal. I mean, that game, that Broncos team and that Broncos defense, that's a pretty solid unit, have really had no answers for him, especially down the stretch as the Raiders are trying to run the clock out on that game. Other guys who were week 1 leaders, Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry's so hit or miss that it's almost impossible to say that he could finish in the top 5.
Right,
Carlos Hyde won't be the leader in Houston.
There you go. Thank you for not arguing Carlos Hyde.
I also think, though, that a guy who didn't get a lot of love because the team was so poor on Sunday is Nick Chubb. He was so dynamic last year once he finally got the chance to be the number 1 option in Cleveland. And I think, after seeing what happened with the game plan, we may see a little bit more run-based offense coming out of Cleveland in week 2 on Monday night.
So, okay. I see what you're saying. And I will say that we're seeing more than just a guy come out of nowhere, the continued evolution of Marlon Mack. 12 games last year, 195 carries, 908 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. 900 yards in 12 games. Awfully good. But the biggest thing working against a lot of the guys you've talked about, and I'm not going to count Josh Jacobs in this group because I think the Raiders were playing weirdly over their head because they wanted to prove to everybody that they're more than just Antonio Brown. I think they're going to come back to earth really hard in the next couple of weeks. So Zeke has Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott. Who else? You didn't even mention Todd Gurley, but then, Cooper Kupp and Jared Goff in the passing game. McCaffrey, I'll give you. Chubb has OBJ and Jarvis Landry and Baker. Marlon Mack doesn't have an equivalent to that. There's no other people to catch the football. Jacoby Brissett looked all right. He looked okay, but he's not Andrew Luck. The Jacoby Brissett to T.Y. Hilton is not going to be a combination that scares people over the course of the season. It's also not going to be a combination that you're going to be able to rely on to pick you up a first down. Marlon Mack's going to be the guy who gets the ball when you need tough yards, when you need a first down, when you need the drive to continue. It's going to Marlon Mack. It's not going to be in the hands of Jacoby Brissett.
I think you're severely discounting the impact that T.Y. Hilton can have for this team.
Yeah, somebody has to throw him the ball.
Sure, and Jacoby Brissett did a pretty good job of that over the weekend when he had 2 touchdowns.
And 190 yards.
Passing, yeah, that's fine. If you score touchdowns and your team stays in the ballgame because of their defense and one of the coolest interceptions I've ever seen in my life.
That's true. Shout out to Malik Hooker.
I mean, that was phenomenal and ripped my heart out fantasy-wise with Keenan Allen being the guy who was supposed to be on the receiving end of that.
Keenan Allen, he has never been able to completely break out in the eyes of the national media.
It's weird.
And I think it is weird because he's sneaky one of the, 5 to 8 best receivers in football and has been for a while. And yet when people rattle off lists of the best guys in the game, he's never on it.
I think what hurts him is he does tend to miss time.
It's true.
every year, like a decent amount of time. It's usually not like, he needed to sit this one out because he had a sore ankle. It's usually like, he's going to miss the next 3 to 4 games, and it seems to happen once a year for that guy. And people like to discount him, but when he's on the field, he is a top-tier receiver without a doubt.
Would it surprise you to hear that Keenan Allen has played in his last 33 NFL games without missing one?
That actually would surprise me.
16 in 2017, 16 in 2018, 1 for 1 in 2019.
I feel like, one for one.
Well, yeah. Well, what's skewing is the 2015-2016 seasons where he got hurt and then he came back and got hurt. And basically missed the entire seasons.
Yeah, those are tough, and I think that still sticks in people's minds.
But basically 200 catches for 2,500 yards plus over the last 2 years. So he's good, is my point. And he's a reason that Austin Eckler won't be in the conversation for being in the top 5 in rushing yards. Although Eckler had himself a nice little game for the Chargers this weekend. There's too many people who are going to take opportunities away from guys on other teams. And I don't think Hilton's going to be as much of that for the Colts.
I just wonder what the number is going to look like for rushing leaders at the end of the season, because, there's a lot of teams that have too many options. Zeke led the league with, 1,400 yards last year? Nothing too crazy, but I think we're past the days of, guys up above 1,500 just because there is so many options in the league. Let's be frank, it's a passing league now more than ever.
Yes, but it's also a very cyclical league. And it's a league where once teams go too far in one direction and too much of a gear up to stop the pass, and all of a sudden the run is your best option because these teams simply aren't built to stop the run at that point, and you can play smash mouth football and dictate offense. It was interesting that only, and I guess it's a sign of where we are in the NFL at this point, but only 9 players crossed the 1,000-yard marker last year rushing, and one of them was Phillip Lindsay. And Chris Carson, man, it's a crazy list. Obviously Nick Chubb was there, and then he lost 4 yards on a carry in a Week 17 game and got knocked under 1,000. Kareem Hunt missed a bunch of games. Melvin Gordon missed games. Marlon Mack missed games. Sony Michel missed games. I don't know. But this is exactly the point I'm making. In a league where people are turning away from the run, the Colts have no option but to turn to it.
Yeah, it does. Having Jacoby Brissett under center certainly makes you think that they're going to have to rely on that run more. I think as he gets more and more comfortable as that leader, and not just like the temporary stopgap that he was, 2 years ago when Andrew Luck missed an entire season. Like, this is his job. He has job security with a contract. Like, it's not, you're auditioning to potentially sign elsewhere. Like, we believe in you. You're going to be our quarterback. I think we may see Frank Reich lean a little bit more on his arm and seeing, just exactly what he can do out there from a passing standpoint.
Super interesting game this weekend. Kind of a morbid curiosity, kind of interesting. But the Colts go to Tennessee to take on the Titans, and Bovada has the Titans -3. Where do you stand on that?
It's in Indianapolis?
It's in Tennessee.
Oh, it's in Tennessee.
So effectively, it's a pick 'em.
Yeah. I kind of like Indy in that game. I feel like, and especially because of the comments from Delaney Walker after the game, the whole the Browns are who we thought they were, throwback to Denny Green. I feel like the Titans might be feeling themselves a little bit. I think that everything that could have went wrong for Cleveland did from a pretty obvious perspective.
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that the Colts can go in there and play a dirty, sort of ugly game with this Tennessee team and kind of grind them down. Tennessee isn't exactly the flashiest team from in terms of names on offense. Their wide receiving core isn't exactly stunning. Corey Davis is good. They have Adam Humphries. They have A.J. Brown from Ole Miss. There's some decent options there. Obviously, Deion Lewis and Derrick Henry in the background or in the backfield, but there still always is the question of Mariota. And even though he looked okay over the weekend against a little bit better of a defense, we may see a different game here this Sunday in Nashville.
It also hurts when you have to overcome 18 penalties. The Browns committed 18 penalties, the most in a game for them since 1951.
Oof. Yeah, it's a bad one.
Yeah.
A lack of discipline and just completely leads to everything kind of falling off the rails. It makes you wonder the preparation in the offseason and how serious this team, took everything, or did they just sort of get into the media hype that pretty much anointed them, AFC title participants?
Yeah, well, I thought the Freddie Kitchens hire was a little premature. Browns Jets this weekend on Monday night. Bovada has the Jets +3. Where are you on that?
Where's the game at again? It's in
New York.
Yeah, I think the Jets give them a serious game. I think they cover. I think the Browns ultimately win, maybe like a late field goal or something. The Jets, it depends on, I guess, the health of C.J. Mosley. That team sort of really kind of fell apart when he had to leave the game on Sunday. I'm still not sold completely on Darnold, but if they can give them a healthy dose of Le'Veon Bell, it may be interesting. Obviously, Quincy Enunwa goes out for the year today for the Jets, so they're even more limited on offense despite getting Demaryius Thomas. And it's too quick of a turnaround for him to be a major factor. Plus, he's 70 years old.
Conservatively.
It's one of those things where I don't necessarily trust the Jets, but it's road favorites don't always fare well in primetime games.
I agree. All right, let's take our second break. We'll be right back. It is the best time of year. It's football season, and Yahoo has officially released their Week 1 daily fantasy football contests. They actually have a $1 million contest for Week 1 with no management fee and $100K to first place, meaning more money goes back to you, the players. There is a 10 entry max. You're not going to be playing against people with 100, 150 lineups on the sites. They've capped it. They've made it more manageable. They've increased your chances to win. Yahoo also has a $100K guaranteed contest, so there's lots of prizes out there for Week 1. Tons for you to win. And this isn't just for the fantasy football hardcore fanatics. This is for everybody. If you're just getting started with Yahoo Fantasy Football, join the free-to-enter Yahoo Cup and play all season long. They've got $150,000 in weekly and season-long prizes. And if you get a perfect lineup, you win $1 million. 1 million, 2 commas with a 1 before it. It's a lot of money. Sign up today at yahoo.com/dailyfantasy or by downloading the Yahoo Fantasy app. You get $20 in free play when you make the first deposit using the promo code POD25. No waiting on that bonus. You can use it right away to enter contests. The minimum deposit is only $5. That's the promo code POD25, POD25. Head over to Yahoo today. All right, Gregory, we're back for our third and final segment. We're going to talk a little NL East wild card action. Tell me why both wild card teams are coming out of the NL East.
So as we stand right now, the Washington Nationals lead the National League wildcard race. They're 2.5 games up on the Cubs, who hold the second spot, 3.5 up on the Brewers, and 4.5 up on our Philadelphia Phillies there, Chris. Diamondbacks are only a half game behind the Phillies, and then the Mets are a half game behind them. The thing is, all these teams around, the Nationals and the Phillies seem to be fading a tad. The Cubs are just a horrendous road team, and they continue to drop games to the Padres in the current series that they're in. They also lost Javi Baez due to an injury for at least the remainder of September. Their pitching has left a little bit to be desired, despite having some names in that rotation. The Brewers suffered just an unfortunate sort of freak injury to Christian Yelich last night, who was, probably the odds-on favorite to be the National League MVP again this year. Fracturing his kneecap, it's tough to overcome. I mean, they've played well, and he's had a couple different absences this year for the Brewers, and he certainly they haven't missed a ton of missed him a ton in that time period, but I think for this stretch run, they really need his bat in the lineup, and unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. The Diamondbacks just don't feel like a real contender to me right now. It's just something weird. They seem to be and they're basically like a 500 team. They're 5 games over 500. Whereas the Nationals and the Phillies, while in similar situations, at least the Phillies are to that Diamondbacks and Brewers team, the Phillies offense has sort of taken a turn, and as long as they can continue to produce at the plate and manage with their mediocre pitching staff, I don't see why it's not a possibility. Washington has cruised, really, for the most part, to their top spot in the wild card and tried to give the Braves a run for their money, but unfortunately that's just not going to be the case. But their pitching is going to keep them in it, and I just think from a storyline perspective, it's built in there. And the Mets, with their unbelievably heroic comeback from where they were, in the middle of July, they're another team that can sort of slug it out, and they also have the pitching that can keep them in this race all the way up until the last weekend of the year.
3.70, 4.31, 4.64, 4.95, 5.52, 5.71, 3.93, 5.01, 7.16, 7.36. Do you know the significance of these numbers, Gregory?
That's definitely the ERAs of some team. My guess is the Phillies.
Those, in order, are the ERAs of Philadelphia starting players who have started a game for the Philadelphia Phillies this year.
Oof.
There is not
great,
a
Chris.
single good one. Aaron Nola sitting there at 3.7 is having a very poor season by Aaron Nola standards, and he's the ace. If you can't stop teams from scoring runs, you're not going to win games. It's that simple. This team signed Drew Smyly and decided he was going into the starting lineup, and he's been one of the better pitchers for them.
To be fair, he's been all right.
Yeah, this is my point. They find somebody on the garbage heap, and he's probably their second best starter. That's not going to work in September, Gregory.
Chris, let's take a quick look at the 2008 Phillies ERA. 3.09, 3.71, 4.55, 5.49, 5.80, and 4.20. That's the ERAs for the 2008 Phillies, who won that because of their offense. That is, and now granted, we certainly had a few more offensive pieces in that year than the current year that we're looking at. But it doesn't always, pitching isn't always the big difference, and especially in regular season baseball. Now, postseason, different story. You're talking about, a 1 game, 2 game situation, 3 game series, 5 game series, 7 game series, those situations. Obviously, pitching makes the biggest difference from a momentum standpoint and things like that. But as the regular season drags on, ERA on a night-to-night basis doesn't always matter. And frankly, the Phillies have started to turn it around at the plate. I mean, they're getting contributions. Last night they hit 5 home runs, against the Braves team that had sort of had their number all year. They were able to take home a 6-5 win in a game where their bullpen actually survived and kept them, in the lead as the game went into the 9th inning.
Please don't compare the 19 Phillies offense to the 08 Phillies offense, where there were probably 3 Hall of Famers in that lineup with Howard, Utley, and Rollins.
I mean, yeah, most likely. But if you think so, Bryce Harper is probably a guy that's a Hall of Famer.
Agreed.
Right. Yeah, that's about it for the
that is about it.
Phillies. But I think there's also a part where the Phillies don't seem to be pressing like they were towards the end of August. Like that the beginning of August, where they were really out there just trying to outslug every team, and it wasn't happening for whatever reason. The pitching coach change, it's definitely made a small difference bringing Charlie Emanuel back into the fold. I mean, it hasn't been as effective as I think, but it's certainly a different mindset when you see them out there. I still question Gabe Kapler. There's no doubt about it. Some of his moves are completely wacky, and I think he's cost them more games this season than people would like to sort of admit. But I just have that feeling that it's it's going to be the way that this works out, and if not, it's going to be one of these heartbreaking situations where the Phillies go into the last day of the season, and it's the Phillies and the Marlins, and the Mets are a half a game out, and if they win, the Phillies lose, they're in, and the Mets will be playing the Braves, who most likely will be sitting a lot of guys because the division's clinched, and I see just a heartbreaking sort of reverse 2007 for the Phillies.
Okay, and that's all fine. How we can argue the Phillies? Talk to me about the path for the Nationals.
The Nationals aren't going anywhere. I mean, they've been at the top of that list pretty much for the entire season. Their pitching staff is just far too superior to really anybody else that's on this list. And if you look at their series as they come up, I have it pulled up here. I have like 17 tabs open.
Mm-hmm. This is the part of the show where people Google things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have them all open pre to this, but I have to get through, Cubs, Brewers, all these other teams to make sure I can get to it. I got it. Don't worry.
Okay.
Here.
Okay.
The Nationals have the Twins they finish up with here. Then they play Atlanta. You have St. Louis, who is, relatively out of it. They play the Marlins. They play that 5-game set against the Phillies, and as much as we want to, think the Phillies have some sort of weird superiority over the Nationals over the course of the past 5 or 6 years, 5 to 10 years. The Nationals have really had their number this season, and that's going to be a real defining series, I think, for both teams, and one that is going to potentially propel the Nationals to just really locking up that number 1 spot. And then they close with the Indians, who, for all intents and purposes, are still sort of hanging around in the AL, but struggling, to say the least.
Look, you don't have to sell me on the Nationals. I agree that they're going to be there. This Phillies team terrifies me. I don't think that Gabe Kapler is the guy to lead the Phillies into the playoffs. And I will admit to being very wrong. I was adamant that the Phillies hired Gabe Kapler when he was up for the job. I thought it could be a great fit. An analytics guy, really smart guy. Didn't work out. And we're hanging on too long, and that's going to be the downfall at the end of the day, in addition to this just horrendous pitching staff.
I mean, the pitching staff's honestly an embarrassment. And I don't know what's happened to Aaron Nola over his last couple of starts, but he's had such a weird up and down season where he struggled early and then in the middle of the year looked exactly like the guy who came in third place in the Cy Young voting last year, and then just recently has completely gone the other way. I mean, putting his team in giant holes at every start, and it's just not been good.
It has not been good, and I can't think of a better way to leave it other than the ace of this team has not been good. It's tough to make the playoffs when that's the case. That's going to be this week's episode of You're Wrong, and Here's Why. For Greg Cronin, I'm Chris Horwoodell. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week.